enhancing.
Thank you. Ms. Jordan, 7 minutes, please.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here today. I have three quick questions. First of all, the $250 million for small craft harbors, how will it be determined where that money is actually allocated? That's one. I'm going to go through all three, and then maybe it might be easier that way. Secondly, with regards to abandoned vessels, Mr. Hutchings maybe can answer this one for me. I know that we've had the program on the West Coast for the smaller boats. I'm interested particularly in larger vessels and the removal of larger vessels. As you are aware, we have a few on the East Coast that, and of course it's great that we're doing some work with the Manolis and with the Catherine Spirit, but there are others. I'd like to know what the process is for removal of those vessels. And thirdly, one of the things I hear a lot about now is enforcement. And the cuts that have been made to DFO previously with regards to enforcement and how it's affecting the local fishery. And I'm just wondering if there's any movement to increase the numbers of enforcement officers on the ground, because or on the water. Exactly. I mean, when you have a long coastline that needs to be protected with fisheries officers, and you've got one boat that takes in from Shelburne to Yarmouth, it's pretty hard to get to a problem. So if someone could address those three concerns, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, thank you, and thank you, Bernadette. I'll take a crack at 1 and 3 and ask the Commissioner with respect to the larger removal of larger vessels. The $250 million, and I want to thank you publicly for your help in securing that funding, Bernadette, with respect to small craft harbors. As you know, there's a normal existing program that the department has. It's a series of points allocated in the normal A-base program of small craft harbors. Puts out about $100 million a year. That's woefully inadequate compared to the need. So that program will continue to operate with respect to the priorities that are established, often in multi-year capital plans and so on. Some of this funding will go to some divestiture projects. The budget, I think, mentioned 4 specific projects, not all divestiture projects, but used as an example in different parts of the country for specific projects that would receive funding. There's no doubt that some provinces and some communities have asked us around divestiture to invest what we need to get the wharves or the particular harbors up to a standard where a province or a municipality could take them over. So some of the funding, and to be honest, I don't think we have an exact proportion yet of what money will be used for divestiture. Obviously, we will use a significant portion of this money to complement the urgent requirement that had fallen off the table from the existing program. So in your constituency, some of the most lucrative and economically important fishing grounds in the whole country. I visited with you a number of harbors in your riding, Bernadette, that are perfect examples of deferred maintenance. If you think of the economic impact of these harbors and the jobs that they facilitate and the importance to the economy of these coastal communities, my hope is that we can, over the next 2 years, catch up on a great number of these projects that had been deferred. And we'd be happy to work with your office and others in terms of getting priorities from you. And I say this to other colleagues who have small craft harbors in their ridings. We are wide open to receiving your views on priorities, and we'll work with you to ensure that this new funding can meet some of those objectives. On enforcement, Bernadette, you're absolutely right. One of the challenges that I heard from Newfoundland to Bella Bella, British Columbia, was the importance of having more fishery officers, conservation and protection officers, habitat protection officers, but particularly fishery officers, C&P officers, on the wharves, on the water. I had visited small detachments where there used to be 5 or 6 people. Now they're down to 3, but it takes 2 to patrol safely. So you can imagine 3 in a particular detachment. You've massively reduced their ability to enforce the Fisheries Act. But it's also a presence. It's a deterrent for those that perhaps might be inclined not to follow the law. It's also a safety aspect in many communities. These people are first responders. I met in Bella Bella, British Columbia last week 2 fishery officers who are in an isolated detachment there. They are, in many cases, the only federal presence along that part of the coast. So I chatted with them about some of the challenges in recruiting and maintaining their staffing levels. So we will be increasing by at least 70, or I hope more, permanent positions of fishery officers across the country. So help is on the way for those working in detachments now. The money we got, almost $300 million with the new Fisheries Act that we're proposing, will be a good first start, but I'll continue to try and rebuild that capacity. And before we run out of time, I'll let the Commissioner, we know the importance of the Farley Mowat. That left, you and I saw that together, Bernadette.
But I have the cormorant too.
No, that's right. And there are other examples across the country. Your riding is a good one, but perhaps, Jeff, you could provide details or some insight into our plan around some of the larger vessels.
Be very happy to, Minister, and thank you for the question. As people around this table know, Bill C-64 has now reached third reading stage, and that bill forms part of a larger plan which fundamentally changes the situation around vessels of concern, primarily by creating liability for abandonment of vessels, which has never existed in the past, but also squarely positioning that legislation in a risk-based approach. And that's the segue to the answer to your question, Ms. Jordan. Our approach to those larger vessels is risk-based. You've already noted that some of the larger vessels that pose a more immediate risk, like Catherine Spirit, like Manolis, we're taking action on those. We expect, as was announced in January, the plan for a long-term plan for Manolis will be out this year. Catherine Spirit is already being dismantled or broken, as we say. As for the other large vessels, we have technical assessments scheduled for many of them. They're ongoing. Corfu Island, for example, the technical assessment is ongoing there. But the order in which those will happen are risk-based. So, for example, we'll be undertaking technical assessments of the Matterhorn and Petrel this year. We have Cormorant down for next year. As we're able to get to vessels, we get to them. And then that generally leads to a funding decision where dealing with the situation is a smaller amount, say in the hundreds of thousands. We'll generally take that out of our environmental response program. Where you're into the territory of, say, a Catherine Spirit, which is almost tens of millions, but over $10 million, then a larger funding decision is required.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.